All right. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the summit so far, getting some useful information, meeting some good people. I am very excited about this particular panel, The Future of AI, a look at policy and business in DFW. If you would please join me in welcoming our esteemed panel here. Give them a quick round of applause. We got Mr. Senator Tan Parker is here with us today. And we also have Mr. Josh Davis, and we've also got David Evans, and down on the end over here, we've got Steve Canard Jr. Gentlemen, I want to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves real quick. They already know who I am, so we're going to start right down here. Josh, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I am the Chief Cybersecurity Officer and Group Vice President at TMNA, as well as similar positions at TCNA, which is Toyota Connected North America, and related role for TMC headquarters. My group of about 2,000 professionals here in Dallas, we do two primary things. One, we secure our products and our services. That includes in-vehicle through connected services to out-vehicle. And then we run the core infrastructure of the business. So cloud, data center, everything from help desk to walk-up centers.
And I'm Tan Parker, and I have the great honor of being the senator here in North Texas, and what a privilege to represent Senate District 12. For those who aren't familiar, let's give you a quick feel for what that looks like in terms of the folks I'm blessed to represent across DFW. Here in the Metroplex in Dallas County, I represent Carrollton, Farmers Branch, Addison, Capel, Las Colinas, parts of Irving, into Dallas itself, North Dallas, and then Preston Hollow, Highland Park, and University Park. A good bit of Tarrant County, everything in DFW Airport, all of Grapevine and Colleyville and northern Southlake, and the majority of Trophy Club and northern Fort Worth and parts of HEB. Then the district goes further west into Wise County, so all of Decatur and Rome and Boyd and Lake Bridgeport and Runaway Bay. And then coming back to more central Metroplex, Denton County, really the big piece of Denton County, the majority of Denton County, all the way up to Sanger. So everything from Sanger and Crum to Denton to Flower Mound and Highland Village and Argyle and Bartonville and all the great communities there in Denton County. So that's kind of what the footprint looks like of the district I'm blessed to represent across 4 counties. I serve today as the Republican leader of the Senate in Texas, as the leader of our caucus. I also serve on a number of different various capacities or committees, if you will, that I chair or co-chair or a member of. I'll be the chairman of Sunset here in 2025, which oversees all of our agencies of government. I'm currently the vice chairman over Veterans Affairs. I'm the vice chairman over all criminal justice matters. I sit on the Education Committee, which is K through 12 and higher ed. I also sit on Natural Resources, and I sit on State Affairs. So if it's a hot button item, it comes to State Affairs. So to kind of give you a frame of reference. And then lastly, and probably of greatest interest perhaps to this group, I've been the co-chair over AI for Texas over the course of the last, call it 16 months or so. Honored to be with all of you to talk about these issues and all the things that are happening here in DFW.
Excellent. Down to you, David.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. My name is David Evans. I'm managing partner of Sentiero Ventures. I started coding at 14 years old on a TI-85 graphing calculator. Started my first business at 19, my second business at 22. Throughout the entire time in my career as an entrepreneur, I've been around artificial intelligence. We were building predictive models for when they put the International Space Station in orbit. And we were building predictive behavioral models as recently or as long ago as the early 2000s. Sentiero, we invest exclusively in AI-enabled software. Everything we do is artificial intelligence, and we started doing it back in 2019, long before it was cool. Now it's probably a little bit too cool. Doesn't fit well for a nerd like me, but it's fun to be able to work with the technology every day and see it come to fruition on an ongoing basis.
Steve, go ahead.
I'm Steve Canard, president of AI Innovation Association. We're a trade association. We serve the interests of entrepreneurs, disruptive companies, and people that believe that AI should be free and open and decentralized. I come from an oil and gas background. I'm an energy professional, really, and I mention that because more and more I think energy companies are going to become AI companies are going to become energy companies, because winning the AI future requires an enormous amount of energy, and that should make you proud to be a Texan, because nowhere is a better place to lead in that than the state of Texas. I'm proud to have this opportunity to serve through the AI Innovation Association, and it came out of the Texas Blockchain Council, which is where I used to work, and I did technology advocacy there. And we saw a similar, I think, trajectory where we went from a time where blockchain and Bitcoin were kind of almost laughed at a little bit, certainly in the halls of the Capitol and in Congress, and now it's becoming increasingly mainstream. And I think the country as a whole is saying we should lean into that innovation. And I see a similar trajectory right now for AI as it becomes more mainstream, that we're seeing a bit of a sea change in the way that that certainly Vice President Vance has put it quite simply. You know, we are going to win the AI future in America, and what a time to be alive and have a discussion like we're having today.
Excellent. Thank you guys all for being here. So we're going to be obviously talking about the future of AI, right? I like to have my panels and discussions be pretty fairly interactive. So with this particular panel, if you feel compelled to ask a question with what's being said, go ahead and put your hand up, and we'll try to accommodate that. And just for time, we'll try to keep it on time, right about 1:15, but we'll see. I think this will be pretty interesting. So, all right, let's dive right into it. Steve, I want to start with you down on the end. What broad trends in AI are taking hold here in DFW or Texas as a whole? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the year in my mind where we move a little bit from kind of buzzword and hype to application. The way that AI kind of became mainstream last year, if you think about it, was really through these chatbots that became kind of the #1 app that everybody downloads and plays around with. Now I think a lot of the value is shifting to the app layer versus kind of this base large language model layer, where you have different applications that are designed to solve particular problems. I think one really interesting example that I'm going to give that's exciting but also kind of scary is in the education space. I've got 3 young kids. We homeschool our kids, and we look at all different kinds of technology and curriculum that's out there, and we actually use an AI-based tutor for mathematics. I've spent probably almost as much time as my daughter watching it, just trying to learn and see what we think about it. And I have to say, it's one of the most remarkable tools I've ever seen. My daughter loves it. Her math engagement has just gone through the roof. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of risk with that as well. I was just in Austin this week, and there's a lot of debate going on around there about banning AI from use in the classroom. I understand the concern, but I think we're going to start to shift this discussion to these kinds of specific applications. And there's nothing more hyper-local than education. I think that's an area that's going to be incredibly disrupted by AI. I think overall it's a net positive. I'm a technology optimist. But we're going to have this collective discussion around what are the pros and cons, what are the risks, how do we mitigate those risks? And even as we see that at education, you're going to see it come in, I think, to human resources across corporate entities and training. More and more you're going to see targeted AI tutors that in many cases are more patient, are more available 24/7, and can deliver content in a way that is best engaged with an end user, as opposed to a single teacher in the traditional way. I don't think we're ever going to go to 100% AI education. I'm not even advocating for that. I think human-to-human interaction is critical in that. But I am going to highlight this. I think we're going to see a lot more in that area.
Excellent. And David, I want to move to you next with the same question, because I think you have a very different perspective from Steve's. I'm curious about that. What are the sort of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to AI here in DFW or Texas?
Sure. Well, I think especially in DFW, we have to look at what our natural resources are, right? A little bit of air quotes around that. But we've got 140 Fortune 500 companies with a national and regional headquarters here. It's only natural that we are at the application layer, right? When you think about the layers of the stack, it's what can AI do for companies like Toyota, JP Morgan Chase, State Farm, Liberty Mutual? Like, what products can you build? Now, the challenge that we're finding is how do we quantify and how do we measure ROI? Because the problem is you go to a chatbot like ChatGPT, and it's a magical experience. Right? But it wasn't magical when you went to Google and got the same basic response. Why wasn't it magical? And the reason why it wasn't magical is that we've got hundreds of thousands of years of human intelligence that's been codified on the internet, right? We've built rules in oil and gas, in real estate. We've built structures around it, And we expect that magical experience that we're going to hand it off to AI, and that AI is going to be the thing that solves it all. Now, mind you, I am an optimist as well. I have to make sure I point that out. Is the challenge that we face is we have to get down to brass tacks and talk about what is the ROI that you can generate, right? And what I look at are things, and I love Steve's example, are jobs not being done, right? Things like education, where we're not getting enough one-on-one time teacher to student. How can we use AI to fill that gap? Healthcare, how can we help fill the gap where it's not getting done? The challenge becomes, though, is how do I quantify that ROI? How do I actually measure it? Because better healthcare, or the example I tend to use most frequently is, if my wait time in a call center, if I call for technical support, my wait time goes from 30 minutes to 0, that's great for me as a customer, but how much money did it save the company, right? How do we sort of work with that? So part of what we're going to see over the course of the next year is really starting to see and understand how we quantify the ROI from these tools.
And Senator, to you.
Well, look, I can take this question from a lot of different vantage points. I'll just kind of give you some general thoughts. Obviously, you've got some great experts here that are applying it at the application level, as you've heard. Look, from my perspective in Texas, what I want to do is I want to make certain that we foster an environment of innovation. And so Steve commented a moment ago on his background with the Blockchain Council and so forth. I've always been trying to be tip of the spear with regard to all things that are innovation, whether or not we're dealing with these kinds of technologies or medical technology or whatever. I always want Texas to lead and be the finest, if you will, example of innovation in America. I believe that it's essential for us to be economically strong and vibrant. Texas today is the 8th largest economy in the entire world. We will surpass France in the summertime and be the 7th largest economy. That's not by accident. That's because each of you in this room, entrepreneurs that are innovating, creating new opportunities for everybody. That's why Texas is such a special place, because we work to get the right tax and regulatory environment, and frankly, to keep regulation at a minimum. So just like we did with the blockchain bill, I remember it was my bill back in the day. It was House Bill 4484 that created the whole structure with regard to digital assets and to provide the lightest possible touch so that the games could begin, i.e. innovation. And that's really what we did and what we accomplished. I view AI much in the same way. So I'm a business person, first and foremost. We're really effectively in Texas a legislative body that is voluntary. And so I've never walked away from being a business practitioner. So I want to see efficiency gains. I want to see opportunities. I want to see Texas continue to be positioned at the forefront of all of these areas so we make the most of it for our people and our economy as a whole. With regard to where I see things in particular happening, obviously here we are at Toyota, and I want to thank our friends at Toyota for hosting us and give us the opportunity to have this discussion here in their great facilities. But clearly there are lots of applications specific to transportation and the automobile world, what the automobile looks like in the future. There are incredible applications in financial services. I'm probably most excited about what will happen in healthcare. With regard to AI applications. I mean, the fact that we can cut through, I think, years in the discovery process for big things that will make a difference in the future of mankind is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I'm a biotechnology investor by profession. I have my own fund. I invest in those kind of companies over the years, and in, not just biologics, but in devices. And so I just kind of think about all the years, all the benchtop, all the work that's been done on things I've been a part of funding and helping drive in my professional private life, and think about how now the use of AI will truly transform that sector going forward, as it will all these others. So the other thing I want to share with people that get concerned and worried about AI is a couple of thoughts. First and foremost, as it's already been said, AI is not new. We've been utilizing machine learning and all these things going back many decades. Every time every Texan or citizen flies in an aircraft, there's obviously AI technology there. Every time we interact with anything just on the computer, basic word processing, all those things over the years, there's all AI elements, even though they're more fundamental and rudimentary than they are today. And so I want people to realize that and understand, just like with the internet, right? We had to embrace the internet as a new technology. We've embraced blockchain, trying to figure out what's going to happen. It's not my role as your North Texas senator to determine what wins and what loses. It's my role to put in place the most minimal regulatory framework so that innovation can thrive. And so that's what I try to do, and happy in this dialogue to talk more about legislation, specific bills, all the things that are happening that will impact not just DFW, but Texas and the country as a whole.
Excellent, excellent. Josh, I'm going to come to you now, and I know being Chief Cybersecurity, I kind of want to add a little bit of flavor to this. And so what are you seeing in the trends, and how do those trends fit into cybersecurity or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, combining that question with the previous question, I agree with what I think Steve and David were saying. This is the year of action, and you could also say it's the year of risk. We stay in pretty close contact with our neighbors, many of which David mentioned, are very large companies in the neighborhood. And I would talk about basically 3 Ps, if I could use a little bit of abbreviations here. This is the year of productivity, personalization, and partnership is how I'm thinking through it. In terms of what's actually being done, most of us have figured out now how to navigate the security complexities to be able to actually use these technologies, the generative AI technologies in particular, in our businesses without overexposing information, without risking privacy issues or confidentiality issues of our data. We finally got the right widgets in place, the right amount of vetting of solutions to make that work and really allow it to be used by a vast majority of our workforce. And in terms of the personalization, again, the big trend, some of which was spoken to earlier sessions, we have quite a few opportunities to improve the customer experience, and so you're seeing everything from the dealers to the sales groups to the marketing groups to the manufacturing groups, all getting involved with improving personalization and driving a more comprehensive relationship with the target audience. And then partnership is the other big trend, especially as it relates to cybersecurity risk, is we are working diligently with state and federal legislators to try to figure out how do we really codify the risk management controls around this technology. We all have the same concerns. We love the partnership approach. We're a very large company. Last thing we want to have is states that have mismatched or conflicting laws. And we also believe that the federal space has done a good amount of work. If you look at the NIST frameworks, for example, we are, again, figuring out how to actually deploy those technologies in a real meaningful way this year. And that's probably the biggest step forward in the next 6 months.
Definitely. And to one of your points about the personalization, that was something that we sort of alluded to in an earlier conversation, and more along the lines of how far should marketers go, right? In their data collection and the data points that they get, the information they get from you. I definitely want to speak to that as well. Personalization is another way of looking at that, and it's been definitely a buzzword in the last couple of years, and that personalization is to feed into that customer experience, like you were saying, Josh, and giving you a better experience. So, and like I was saying earlier, it's like for marketers, myself included, ultimately, we want to provide you with a really good experience. We want to provide you with information and material that's useful for you. So I definitely I second that for sure. So Senator, I want to come to you with this question here. And you definitely touched on this earlier, but what is the role, or what role should local governments play in regulating AI, if any at all? How can they collaborate with businesses to drive that innovation you were referring to earlier? How do they do that?
Well, great question. I mean, look, at the end of the day, innovation, make no mistake, is not driven by government, it's driven by you. It's driven by business, it's driven by entrepreneurs. And so my general framework and belief, as I said a moment ago, is to have that lightest regulatory touch possible and then candidly get the heck out of the way, because I want business to drive innovation. And let me speak to that in a little bit more deeper understanding of why I believe that way. If you will, let me step back. If you look at the internet for a moment, I think that's probably the best example for us to talk about as a comparison, the dawn of the internet age and the dawn now of this new generation, if you will, of AI, where it's now cool, is what's been determined. If you look at what happened, the United States did not overly regulate the use of the internet. The European Union did. Very clearly, looking 20, 25 years after that time period, you see that the United States was the big winner when it came to all the success that our internet companies had. The private sector here, with regard to internet technologies, absolutely crushed what anyone else was doing anywhere in the world, and particularly the European Union, where you had such a very complex and I think overly burdensome regulatory environment. I think that's a lesson from history. I can talk about several other lessons from history that go back to the beginning of the industrial age. And so I just think we've got to be smart about what we do. Now, a couple thoughts. First and foremost, I realize as the 8th largest economy in the world, the largest, well, and popping to being the 7th largest here in the summer, I recognize that we have an enormously important role to play. I also believe that our economy needs to be second to none and growing at a faster, better rate than not just the other 49 states, but frankly, any country anywhere in the world. And so as a result of all of those things, we've got to make certain that we recognize our role and responsibility in Texas. When we create good policy that puts in place the right framework, which is our objective between now and call it Memorial Day here in Texas, it will become the model for the rest of the country. The other states will adopt what Texas is doing if we do it right, one. And two, the federal government will ultimately adopt the same standard. Don't hold your breath waiting for them to take action with regard to AI policy broadly. They've got a lot of issues to tackle. Of course, you all know my politics as a Republican, so I'm encouraged about the current environment now in Washington, and they'll be able to tackle more things with more seriousness on a faster, better rate than what we've seen for a long time. But that's still to be determined because you've got really a very thin Republican majority in the U.S. House. It really hangs in a balance, but it's a couple of members. So as a result of all of that, what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce a bill that deals with AI regulation and how it needs to be handled for the state of Texas, for all of our government agencies, all of them. Be it whether or not you're working with the Department of Public Safety, whether or not you're working with the Workforce Commission, whether or not you're working with the Texas Education Agency. And that will obviously impact all of the entities that are subordinate to the state, meaning all of the counties, all the cities, and so on and so forth. I will file that bill between now and let's say the end of the week. And so you'll be able to see exactly what I'm referencing here now this morning. But what I'll tell you is that what I'm trying to do in terms of finding the right balance is first and foremost, I will lead with a AI code of conduct, an AI ethical code of conduct for the way that it needs to be utilized with regard to all governmental entities in the state of Texas, first and foremost. Secondly, what I will do beyond that is to really put guardrails in place with regard to vulnerable populations. I will focus specifically on protecting our children from any kind of predatory behavior, from the monsters that are out there that we all know exist, unfortunately, in our society. And I do not care whether or not something really happened in real life or whether or not it's fake, exclusively fake and AI generated. Those are horrific things, and they need to be addressed. And so I will be very aggressive on putting people behind bars that would do anything that would be predatory to our children. I want anyone out there listening to the sound of my voice to be very clear about what we will do and what my colleagues and I will lead on that. We have zero tolerance for all that garbage. We will also focus on protecting other vulnerable populations, which to me are seniors. And I'll tell you an example would be elder financial abuse. I'm very concerned about that topic. I've been leading on that topic with regard to consumer protection for a long time and carrying bills historically. And now, even though I enacted things 5 or 6 years ago, they are now, frankly, in many ways outdated because of the use of AI, bad guys using AI in a predatory capacity with senior citizens. And so there's nothing, one of the more challenging things I see is a constituent that has done everything right in life. They're now in their mid-70s, having health challenges, having issues, and to literally have their entire life savings wiped out in 24 hours because of some of these things that are happening cannot be tolerated. So those are really, for me, the high, if you will, content, if you will, elements of what I will bring with regard to regulation. The other thing I will say is that I want and believe in a human in the loop. I also want to stress to you all that my view is this. The use of AI is to augment human performance, period. Not to replace, but to augment human performance. So I want to be very clear about that. People then, of course, always ask, what are the issues with the job market, the workforce? what's going to happen? Well, look, I'm an optimist. I always believe that the future of Texas is incredibly bright. The future of our country is incredibly bright, that we'll have great opportunities for folks to make a living, to provide for their families. And I think on balance, AI technologies will add more, will create more jobs and more opportunity using AI. At the same time, I'm the author of the True Initiative back in 2021. For those that are familiar with that, which is the Texas Reskilling and Upskilling Initiative. And that was all about making certain that people that have lost a job, whether or not they're in their 20s or their 30s, their 40s, 70s, wherever they are on the spectrum of life, that they have the opportunity to learn new skills in one of our great vocational schools or community colleges, not in 2 or 3 or 4 years, but in 6 months or less, to put them back in a great job providing for their family. So I look at all those things holistically. All of that will be part of the package of legislation that I will publicly release and file here in the Capitol this week. But it will definitely have huge implications for what we do, I think, here in Texas with regard to AI. But I hope it sets the standard, not just for Texas, but for the country. And again, fundamentally, we'll put those safe guardrails in place and then step out and allow you all as innovators to execute.
Thank you, Senator. Bold statements, and I like it. You're answering all the questions I had. Yeah, we had a question over here.
So everything you said is amazing. I would love to go back to something that you said about AI in education. I'm a big believer that if we start educating our youth now on how to leverage AI, then you're not going to have to train them as they get older. Is that something that you think is going to be a part of your package, providing the schools, the school districts, and the ability to leverage AI in a way that can train them to use it as a way to augment their skills as they're growing up as well?
Well, look, I'm not in my bill going to be so prescriptive to talk about those kinds of scenarios. We'll allow the flexibility to work with TEA, work with the school districts and so forth. Look, I believe in the appropriate use of technology, any kind of technology for our children. I also believe, of course, I'll be very candid, that there's a proper role for technology and there's roles that are not appropriate. And let me be very candid about that just for a moment. I'll be brief so we get to the other panelists. But what I will tell you is that I do worry, particularly with our youngest children. And I'm a guy that believes in technology. But I do believe that we have too much screen time for our children. And I believe that the soft skills are vitally important as well. And I've been around so many children, my own, as well as constituent children and so forth, that are not interacting in a healthy way always. And I've been around too many pizza parties with my kids and their friends when I've got 20 kids in the kitchen and they're all on their phone and interact with their phone and not with one another. And I see the byproduct of that later on in life, and we've got to address those kinds of serious issues, along with privacy, along with confidentiality, all those kind of things. So whether or not you're talking about blockchain, whether or not you're talking about AI, any of these topics, when it particularly comes to our children, I am particularly sensitive and careful to address. But yes, I recognize at the same time that there are applications that can be very beneficial, particularly like Steve highlighted, talking about math tutoring and things along those lines. So it's finding the balance, and that's where we are going forward.
Thank you, Senator. David, I want to come down to you this next question. What industries in DFW show the most opportunity of being disrupted by AI, and how should businesses in those sectors prepare?
Sure. So when we're talking about disruption, it tends to be industries that have sort of a pre-existing lock-in, right? The two that I think have the biggest challenges, and this used to be part of the DFW history, not so much anymore, is contact center and legal services. And if you think about the role of those functions, in a lot of cases, and I'm not denigrating attorneys, I'll do that separately over a drink.
There you go. I'll join in.
But when you look at legal services, so for example, when we form a venture fund, right, we basically use the same documents that every other venture firm in the country uses. We make a minor bit of change to it, right? Where does that work go? That work goes to a junior associate to do the find and replace of Sentiero Ventures with Interlock Ventures or whatever the other fund is, right? That's been a lock-in. That has been a mandate of you form a new fund at $75,000. Like, but I just did this 4 years ago. Why am I spending $75,000 to prepare these documents? It's a very similar thing when you look at customer contact center. It's the vast majority of the calls that come into a customer contact center are very basic questions, right? That we can't get via self-serve, but that AI enables access and the ability to answer those questions more quickly, right? So what happens is we have these artificial barriers and boundaries set up in these industries that AI, we could have gotten rid of them a long time ago, right? We could have become more efficient. We could have used natural language processing, better systems design to minimize them. But now AI has the opportunity to completely reshape the way that work gets done. Now, the key piece of this, to build on something that Senator Parker said, is that we're not replacing the attorney, right? We're not replacing the customer contact center representative. We're replacing the attorney that's doing the busy work of replacing Sentiero Ventures Fund 1 with Sentiero Ventures Fund 2. We're focusing that time and energy on dealing with the nuance of how do we deal with international LPs, or should we organize the fund in Delaware, or should we organize it in the in Texas, or should we do it in the Cayman Islands, right? Dealing with the highly subjective issues, which, oh, by the way, AI is terrible at. AI is still a probabilistic engine that's based on statistical certainty, right? It doesn't deal well with uncertainty. That's what we do as human beings. So you put the work of uncertainty back in the hands of the humans, not the mechanical, hey, we're just going to go and do a find and replace. So those are two examples, I think, that we're seeing a lot of disruption.
Excellent. And I want to come down to you with the same question, Steve. What do you think? What sectors are most opportunistic for disruption? What do you think?
I'm going to give a couple concrete examples just from my personal experience. I'm a dual U.S. Panamanian citizen. I've lived in Panama for 3 years, so I speak Spanish and English. And over the years in my professional capacity, I've done a fair amount of translating from English to Spanish, enough to tell you that the tools that were out there for years were absolute garbage. And anybody that said you can just put something into the internet or Google Translate or whatever it was, it just didn't work. And I don't remember which version it was when all of the kind of ChatGPT craze was going on. But it wasn't that long ago that I put some clipped a newspaper article or whatever, put it in there, said translate it to Spanish, and it still wasn't very good. And I said, this is kind of a lot of hype. That was my test, just because I knew how to use that as a benchmark. Another version came out, I put it in, and it had like 100x'd and how good it was. And now all of those versions are basically free. So whatever you're viewing today is going to improve, 10x over the next year or so, and then will be free in a couple of years. And when I saw that on the translation side of things, that's when I started to say, I really want to work on this, because this is taking something that used to take me hours and maybe thousands of dollars, and now it can be done in 30 seconds, and it was almost comparable quality. That's just my personal kind of experience. And we're starting to see that as one of the fastest applications, actually, of AI is real-time translation. And I'll take that kind of a step further. One of the companies that I represent through our association is building an AI tool that automates the underwriting process for mortgages. And I bring this up because one of the primary concerns in that area is discrimination. There's a lot of controversy, and I think some of it is rightfully so, about the disparities in services that different populations receive in terms of mortgage underwriting and ultimately the approval for home ownership. And there's, I think, a risk to jump to the conclusion that the same types of discrimination that have happened before will be encoded in an AI tool, and it'll propagate that further. But the example that I can give you is actually the opposite, where this mortgage underwriting tool allows for real-time translation. I think they've got 100 languages now. And I've been to all kinds of events and talked to people that are successful business people. They've been in the US for a long time, but English isn't their primary language. And this was the first tool that they could use in real time, get an approval quickly, and buy a house. And the moral of the story is that sometimes the solution to our perception of a bad AI is more AI, a good AI, a marketplace of ideas that will deliver the best solution, instead of us prescribing that a particular use of AI will perpetuate discrimination. I think the financial services is going to continue to be really disrupted. And the name of that tool is Angel AI. It's really cool. It's in the marketplace right now. They've underwritten billions of dollars using it. So it's just a real world application of that is here and now. And I've seen people look them in the eye and heard their stories about how it made a big difference in their life. The third one I'm going to say, we're here at Toyota, so I couldn't help myself. I want to talk about autonomous driving. I heard a recent discussion that really stuck with me. I think there's been a narrative of everything's going to be electrified in the world, and it's going to be autonomous, and it's going to happen tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and passes, and then we kind of kick it out another year, and we've been doing that for a couple of years now. I heard a really interesting interview, and it was the founder of Uber, somebody who knows something about managing large fleets, talking about the sheer amount of infrastructure needed to electrify entire fleets, deliver that at scale, and make it work for businesses. I think we're going to see a big disruption in that narrative. I'm not saying Tesla's going to go away, guys, but the valuation multiple there is a little high, maybe. That's not financial advice. But what I am saying is there's an interesting, I think, turning point that we're approaching, where as we start to see technology come to market to make full self-driving real, and if you've interacted with it at all, you can see it's advancing very fast. Internal combustion engine still has a role to play there, and there's also open source companies. There's a company called Comma AI that delivers aftermarket products that you can hook up to a car. It's based on open source and helps the car drive, more autonomously. It works on Toyota vehicles as well as other make and model. And those kinds of tools haven't gotten a lot of headlines. What we've seen in the AI world is something can go from total obscurity to #1 in the App Store, DeepSeek, right? If I were making a prediction, I think we're going to see more open source disruption there, and I don't think the internal combustion engine is done. So that's my kind of controversial take, but I'm an oil man as well, so maybe I'm just talking my own book. But at least it's something for us to talk about, right?
Let me make this quick comment. I got to say something about that. Look, oil and gas, this is Texas. We're the energy capital of the world. Oil and gas is king. Yes, we believe in other uses and other types of energy, but those kind of ridiculous mandates to be exclusively electric and so forth are absurd. They have no place in Texas. They have no place in this country. Texas won't take that kind of nonsense lightly, and so we're going to continue to drive forward until the technology one day is there to support it. Yeah. But you're exactly right. There's no way that we could possibly ever, at this time and where we are in our development as a people, as a society, address all the electricity needs for what you're talking about in terms of this enabling of every car. I mean, it's just silly. The combustion engine is alive and well, and I want Toyota and everyone else, I appreciate their leadership on this topic, to realize that there's a large number of Americans that want to continue to have a traditional vehicle fueled by gas, right?
Well said, Tom.
This is good stuff, isn't it? All right, I want to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to come to you, Josh, with this question. So how do we strike a balance between innovation and consumer protection when it comes to AI and some of the AI-driven policies? Any one of you can come in on this, but I'm just going to start up here first. So,
well, certainly they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, the two concepts. And I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to understanding your policies, having a good governance framework, having good competency in the engineering, having awareness of your employees at both a utilization and impact level of the technologies and the consumer protection issues. So, and that has to be backed up, again, by a strong partnership with government, right, who's really shining the light on the guardrails that we need to implement throughout that process.
So just to add a little bit to it, I mean, I think when I think about sort of consumer protection and regulatory frameworks, it's not about regulating the technology, right? It's not the technology in and of itself isn't the problem. It's the application of the technology. So using Steve's example, is it any different in looking at somebody being denied a mortgage based on the color of their skin? Is it any different or any less reprehensible doing it a human or an AI? And the answer is really no. So if we're going to develop sensible frameworks around how do we protect the consumer, it's about the outcome, because it's not bad just because oh, well, a human being stole grandma's life savings, oh, that's okay, just don't let an AI do it. That's the faulty logic and the bad way to look at it. And if you listen to the example Senator Parker gave, they really all fall in line of here's the bad things that we need to regulate. And candidly, it's whether there's AI or not, right? Like AI is an enabling tool in doing bad things, just like it's an enabling tool in doing good things. We need to restrict the bad things, not the technology that's doing it.
Oh, that's exactly right. And so as a result of that, when I think about what the regulatory framework is, look, there's a lot of great laws already on the books that address bad behavior, to your point, whether or not it's from a human being or it's an AI tool. And so, therefore, I don't see the need to be overly prescriptive in what we're doing in Texas, right? And I think we're also, let's go big picture for a moment. I think we're at the beginning of this entire AI movement. We're at the very beginning. And so this is a critical stage, and we got to encourage innovation. Let me be further direct with all of you about what I really believe, which is this. I think that if you look at historically where we are as a country, you look at the last 50 years of the world. If you think about the fact that we had a space race back in the 60s, I think the present is the AI race. And it's America pitted against China and Russia, Iran, other actors in the world, and America must win. We must crush it. And at the end of the day, I believe there is peace through strength for America and our allies globally. I can only secure the blessings of liberty and freedom, as President Reagan would say, as President Trump would say, only if we have innovation that is so absolutely superior to these other nations that we have the ability to truly have peace through strength. And therefore, innovation is king. We must drive innovation in every opportunity. Let the games begin. But America, at the end of the day, needs to be number one when it comes to all development and AI. We must have the most incredibly sophisticated and advanced capabilities in this country. And I believe that Texas will lead in that entire enterprise. Texas will do its part, because we all know this as proud Texans. The future of America depends on a strong Texas that stands up and leads for innovation and economic opportunity, as well as liberty and freedom. And that's where we're going in the future. And that's why I think getting this regulatory framework right has such huge implications for the future of this country and, frankly, the world.
I like it. I see a question out here. Go ahead.
For Senator Parker. So I'm a native Ohioan, now proud Texan, and my home state is now stepping into building microchips and processors, where that was really spurred out of what happened a couple of years ago with the chip shortage during the pandemic. So my question for you is, part of that was incentivized by the state government, the federal government, through tax incentives, through overall funding through the federal government as well. Where do you feel the government's place is in either subsidizing, funding, or taking a step back in order to promote that advancement? In this case, it would be AI.
Well, it's a great question, and I appreciate the example of what's happening here in Ohio. So fundamentally, when I think about governance, government broadly, so on and so forth, I take an approach that I believe in the concept of federalism. What is federalism? Federalism believes that the states drive the agenda for America forward, right? The states, we created the Capitol in Washington, D.C., not the other way around. D.C. gets it often so wrong. But real opportunity, real innovation, the laboratories, if you will, of democracy are the states. So I love when the states compete with one another. I love that our friends in Ohio are driving and really being great leaders in the chip space, as are other states. Because again, ultimately, when our states compete, Americans win, the country as a whole wins. So that's a great framework for where we are. So I just want to say that to set the stage. What I will tell you is that I believe that it is best for government to incentivize and to set the standard, set a direction, but to incentivize. I don't like mandating behavior in the private market. I don't think it's the right place to be. I believe in limited government. I believe in free markets. I believe in free enterprise. And so, look, there are things where we need to shape, if you will, policy appropriately to make certain that we're addressing big opportunities that are critical to the future of our state and our nation. But I really ultimately want to create an environment, a regulatory environment and an incentive environment where the private sector sees the opportunity and jumps on it. That's really what I want to see happen. And I think really, if you see what's happening in chips or any of these other areas in Texas where we're getting an incredible dominance, if you will, Texas is leading, it's because we're an attractive place to do business. It's the framework, right? It's our tax environment. It's our regulatory environment. It's the quality of our workforce. It's the quality of our educational systems. You know, we have more Tier 1 universities in Texas now than California. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. By design, we've been working to make that happen, which is driving research, driving innovation, all those things. So to me, again, it's finding that right balance. But I'm not saying there's not cases where Texas, for example, or a governmental entity needs to go and directly provide resources to get something going. There's some of those cases that are accurate and appropriate. But by and large, I prefer incentives than I do any kind of mandate or making big direct investment on behalf of the taxpayer, if that makes sense. But it's a great question, and I hope everyone understands the implications for going forward, right? Thank you.
All right, so we'll keep moving on here with questions. I've got two more. I think we'll do pretty good at digging into some of these here. Steve, I'm going to start down there. I'm going to kind of work back this way. What technology, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but if we can expand a little bit, what technologies do we need to build for successful business operations to work in all of this infrastructure?
Yeah, well, look, I think we're in good hands with Tan's leadership in Austin. We need more representatives and senators like Tan that are pro-innovation and thinking big about what Texas needs to do to lead. One of the biggest, I think, points of risk, frankly, is with the energy demand that we're going to see from AI moving forward in the near term. I think every week I see some new headline where like the total number of gigawatts needed goes higher and higher. I believe in energy abundance, and so I think that's a good thing. I think it's a challenge to us to deliver that, to win. That's the way we beat China, as Tan pointed out. However, we have to recognize a reality, a political reality, but also a moral reality, that we shouldn't have a situation where the power in your house goes out or at a school or at a hospital and the data center's still running. Nobody's advocating for that. So what do I think that looks like? I think we're going to see a big debate around building out more energy infrastructure along the AI kind of superclusters that are being built. Just a year ago, if you had said that you'd have 100,000 NVIDIA GPUs deployed in a single location, people would have said you're completely out of your mind. Elon did it in Memphis. Now we're going for 200,000, right? And so the idea that it can't be done or we won't get there or we don't need to plan for that kind of level, I think we need to dispense with that kind of thinking and go big. We've seen those kinds of announcements. We have the power here in Texas. I just think that AI and particularly data center companies are going to have to, and I think it's a good thing, are going to become energy companies and invest in more reliable generation that we need as a state to deploy this technology and win. I am supportive of data centers. I think we need them. It's the only way that we're going to have the innovation happening here. But there is a tension there. And I suspect that we'll have movement on that. And you're going to see more and more data centers co-located with the energy as opposed to kind of the traditional approach where you pull up to the grid and you hook in and then that's kind of it. I think we're evolving to a new place. And DFW is like one of the leading, we're like the land of data centers here. Let's lean into that and own that. That would be my call to action, is that we shouldn't see it as a problem or something to be scared of. I mean, to me, the right amount of energy for us to have in Texas is more, always more. And we can do that, and that's the mindset that we should have.
I like it. You touched on the energy side. David, what do you think? What can you add there? What technologies do we need to build these businesses?
We need to do a better job. We need technology to get our arms around our data, right? So AI is incredibly data hungry. So Jan LeCun, principal researcher from AI researcher from Meta, has said that we're out of data. It's not really true, right? We're out of publicly available data that we can feed to these models. But behind corporate firewalls, we've got massive amounts of data. And 85% of corporate data is what we call dark data. It's data information that we don't traditionally use and manage, right? It's in Word documents, it's in chat logs, it's in emails. It's never been curated, right? It's just it's the exhaust of doing business, right? It's not the stuff that's in our ERP and our accounting system. That's been curated and maintained. We know exactly what's there, because if the revenue number for last quarter is wrong, we go back and we correct it. However, if I send you the wrong revenue number in an email and you correct me in a meeting, I don't go back and correct the email, right? 85% of data is in that dark category. We have to figure out ways to be able to bring that to bear on behalf of organizations in enterprises. I'll give an example. I'll give you a quick example. For our fund, we have a presentation deck. We have 52 different versions of our presentation deck. That fits into that dark data category. If I'm going to feed that to an AI model, how do I communicate to the model, and how does the model understand which is the best version, right? And which is the most relevant? The 52nd may not be the best. Elements of the 52nd are the best, but elements of the 33rd may also be the best. We have to understand how we feed that framework and those guidelines to our models and into our artificial intelligence, because we have to be able to give that guidance going forward to unlock all of that data that we're not actively using.
Real quick, I want to, let me come to you real quick, Josh. I want to work this. I want to make sure I get this question into this entire context, and then Senator, I'm going to come to you, and we'll open it up to a couple questions. Josh, thinking along these same lines, right? The technologies that we need to build successful businesses. How does the data privacy part of that work into it? How does cybersecurity fit in along with the infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, on the security side, first I have to say, I mentioned earlier, this is the year of the 3 Ps, right? And actually being able to apply a lot of this technology at scale to do productivity and personalization, and then drive partnerships, right? So I think for the most part, we've found a good spot at where we're at right now in terms of actually being able to deploy this in large enterprises. Now, there are always things that can improve, right? And to David's point, like finding the next level of big win, the next level of application is great. I think that's kind of where we're at. In the security specific space, I think we've mastered things like how do we do prompt guards? How do we make sure people aren't asking for bad things? And how do we make sure that the data being returned from the engines don't contain bad things, right? But then there's a deeper security inspection that has to go on. So if I look at the next several months of next several years of investments that I see today and from folks like David, they're really going a level deeper, and they're going into the actual language models themselves, into the individual components, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what is going on in terms of change management? How do we know that we achieve a golden state? And then how do we track changes against that golden state? And how do I make that, do basically change release management within my application of that language model, right? Because right now, a lot of that stuff is running maybe by a third party, like a cloud provider or something. Some people are doing it in-house, on-prem, or via their own open source deployments, but they're still the same fundamental change management problems, right? You want to be able to import all of the good change around bug fixes and better performance, but then you got to watch out for that one little thing that somebody plugged in somewhere that you're not going to catch, right? And that's really the next level of security technology that we're looking at.
Senator, I want to give you the last word, and then we'll go to a couple questions. And I know, unfortunately, we're running over a little bit of your networking time, but we'll take care of that. But Senator, last word.
Thank you. So let me kind of comment on both those last topics real quickly. First and foremost, on the cyber piece, Texas infrastructure, all of our state agencies, doesn't matter if it's DPS, the workforce, TEA, all of it, Health and Human Services. We have millions and millions and millions of attacks on our infrastructure happening every week in Texas. And we worry about, obviously, our own infrastructure from a state perspective, but I worry about all of your infrastructure from a private market perspective as well, and all the challenges. And so as a result of that, I'll simply say this: you can follow along and watch. But you saw Governor Abbott in his State of the State address just a couple weeks ago announce an emergency item, which is the creation of Texas Cyber Command. And I will be leading that effort, working with Governor Abbott in the Senate. So stay tuned. I want you to know we take that issue very seriously. And so that's a whole other topic of conversation about what we're going to do to position ourselves as the state that leads the cyber world, if you will, not with regard to just playing defense, but with regard to playing offense for all of our entities in the state. So I want to share that with you and give you my commentary on that. Then with regard to Steve's comments, with regard to energy in particular, I want to comment on this as well. Right after President Trump's announcement in the Oval Office of Stargate, I'm sure all of you are familiar, within 24 to 36 hours, the leadership of those companies went from the Oval Office to your Texas Capitol. And we're visiting with the governor, the lieutenant governor, myself, and a colleague or two of mine in the House. And the reason being is that they're serious about making an investment. Data centers are the future, obviously, in a big way of this whole AI movement. You can't, really drive it forward without an adequate, if you will, number of data centers. My team member here, Shannon Graham, in the audience, will tell you that there's probably no topic we've had more meetings on the last 12 or 18 months than data centers, because it's such a hot topic. Everybody's talking about data centers. And I've, of course, been involved in incentive legislation historically to be able to create more data center and more data center investment in Texas. So I share that with you as a backdrop. But I want to apologize to all of you as Texans for what happened in February of 2021. That should never have happened with that storm. The impact that it had on all of us was absolutely disgusting, and it was a failure of Texas government. And I'll also tell you, since that time, my colleagues and I, every member of the House, every member of the Senate, the governor, lieutenant governor, the PUC, ERCOT, we've been focused on this mission every day to make certain that it never happens again. And we've made real strides. We created the Energy Fund last session. I'm happy to tell you that we had a private energy summit that the lieutenant governor and I were a part of, and the governor and I did this at the Estonian last February, and it really attracted a lot of new investors to come to our energy market, because what do we need? We need more dispatchable power in Texas. This is what Steve was getting to earlier. We need more dispatchable power. The only way that we really have reliable, dispatchable power today is natural gas, period. It's what works in the winter, it's what works in the summer, and it's what we need to have. Now, I'll also tell you that I think our future from an energy perspective to address these data centers will be in the mix 5 years and beyond, will be nuclear. And for those of you that watch the bills that are filed, I carried a major nuclear bill last session in 23, and I filed a major nuclear bill to help expedite the process in Texas just in the last week. So we're very involved in that. It all is interconnected. From a policy perspective, I've got to make certain. There's nothing, let me be very clear and wrap up. There's nothing more important to me than the safety and security of almost 31 million of us here in Texas. It's what keeps me up at night. And so I think about our security posture all the time. But what I'll tell you is to not have adequate energy resources is unacceptable. And so while we see these incredible projections on the usage of energy going up with AI data centers, I want to reassure every Texan that our priority is them, and they will be in good shape going forward. But I also want to tell the business world that come and invest in Texas. We will work with you. We'll find creative solutions to make certain that you have a degree of independence with regard to your energy needs, so as to be able to fuel the future of AI for Texas and the country in this broader battle that we see ourselves in going forward. So we're in the middle of all of it. I look forward to your feedback. My door is always open. Let me know I can ever be of service. As a senator, I'm only as good as the feedback I get from my constituency, and I'm so blessed to be with so many entrepreneurs and great business people that are driving the future of Texas. So come see me. Let's continue to talk about all these things and how we can better shape and improve and strengthen the future of our state.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Okay, so I want to open up the floor a little bit. Maybe a couple relatively quick questions just for time. If you can ask them. I saw your hand first. I'll go over here after that. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, I guess as somebody who spends a lot of time at the tip of the spear, I guess I'm just wondering, right? So I had a roommate of mine who's from Ireland, right? And he lives in Dublin now, and so Dublin does not allow the building of data centers anymore. You can't do it until 2028, right? Like, data centers get built in Dublin because Ireland's wet and it's cold. So it's easy to not have all the stuff that goes along with it, right? And when you talk about XAI coming on to Memphis' grid, that's Tennessee Valley Authority's grid. One of my childhood friends runs the ED program for TVA, and they're a nonprofit, right? So their mandate is create jobs or lower the cost of energy. That data center barely has anybody in it. So the load profile is an energy at an inflection point with no net jobs, right? And I guess like my question is, and again, with our grid being built for 75 years and now it's 100 years old, we have a transmission and distribution issue where like we need 700 miles of that stuff built every year. We're doing 200, right? Like how realistic are we being about like the data center piece and as it relates to energy poverty, right? Like, so I guess I would ask the entrepreneurs up here, like, what are we looking at as far as like maybe microgrid investment to help, and then, you know, like how far are we going to throttle this AI piece and this data center piece before we say the infrastructure's too big, the terawattage is too high, and we're causing energy poverty for the bottom 80% of our country? I guess that's my question to all y'all out there.
Well, so I'll give you one perspective on it. Generally speaking, is that we're in the early part of the technological cycle, right? This is no different than delivering broadband to rural America. right? And early on, you couldn't have a company like YouTube because you didn't have the bandwidth, right? But there was a massive push to build bandwidth, and massive push. I mean, I remember my very first DSL line cost me like $600 a month for, like, the bandwidth that I used to pay $600 a month for is the same that Verizon bricks me to if I go over my limit, right? That's the penalty. The penalty in 2024 is what my life used to be. So we're in this phase of building out the infrastructure, but there's a key piece that we need to talk about, and I could have used this as my answer to one of the other questions, is that we're not talking enough about making the underlying technology better and improving the underlying algorithms. That's the thing. Right now, we are driving the military-grade Hummer to the grocery store to get eggs and then bring them home. And then we go back again to get the milk. There's an opportunity, and this was one of the things that it was highlighted by DeepSeek, and that there's lots of sort of geopolitical issues and privacy and whatever, but the key that DeepSeek brought to bear was that we need to be working on making the algorithms better, not just improving the data centers, because the demand isn't going to go away, right? The more efficient the more efficient you make the algorithm, the more accessible the products happen to become. So the bigger the demand. So rather than having a narrow demand, right now there's fundamentally 10 buyers for NVIDIA GPUs, right? If you can make the algorithms more efficient, you broaden that demand. And now all of a sudden, instead of it simply being the realm of Amazon and Alibaba and Tesla and OpenAI, it now becomes the realm of every small business in this room to start working directly with AI to benefit your business. So as much as we see this near-term pain point, right, we need to be focusing on how we can improve the algorithms, how we can improve the technology. And it's not just DeepSeek. I want to leave you with that. Is that based on sort of the long tail analysis of what we saw with DeepSeek, what it really boils down to is they were about 9 months ahead of Anthropic. That's it, right? Take out the Chinese propaganda and nonsense and geopolitical. They're about 9 months ahead. They fudged a lot of numbers, but we need that push. We need to stay ahead, right? We don't want to let them be 9 months ahead. We want to be 9 months ahead of them. But the more and more innovation we have on improving algorithmically, the less acute the demand is on building data centers.
So we got 2 minutes left. I saw one question over here I want to get to, and then I'm going to have to cut this off. I know you have a lot of questions, but that's also why we're here to network and ask questions and all of that after the fact. But I do really want to keep us on time. Dan, I saw you had your hand up. Go ahead and get your question in. Let's get an answer.
Yeah, Dan here, founder of Connect and DC Arena. I'm working with a publicly listed Thai company that have a power plant in Texas. They IPO last year, have $300 million. They wanted to reinvest in AI data center in Texas specifically because the power plant is in Texas. But I don't know, does the government have like an AI data center team or a data center team specifically that you can talk to? Just, I can't really find those information right now. Who should we talk to? We have money to invest, but we don't know who to talk to right now.
Well, let me field that question. Pretty clear.
And give you a card. Right?
How about I'll give you my contact on the way out. Shannon and I will give you a card, and we'll get you connected to the Governor's Economic Development Office and to the PUC and ERCOT. So absolutely, we can take that to do. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Give my panel a round of applause, please.